Ooh, my camera is on.
Yeah. And
I'm going to say the Q&A for this.
yes. Hi guys. I'm gonna make sure that this is we are going to get started here. My name is I'm Christine Utters. Hello. I'm one of the school counselors here. We have Kinsey Hadeen and Mallory Newman. And we have, and Miss Wynn is here, but she's just helping direct parents. This is Angela from Seattle U, and we have a couple reps for financial aid support. We're going to run through a couple presentations on your tables. There are index cards. If you have questions, feel free to write them. We'll be collecting them and redirecting them up here for our presenters. For our online participants, we have counselors that are monitoring the chat, although there is obviously some tech issues. So just keep asking questions in the chat and we'll come to them and read them out as we can. But I'll turn it over to you. You can get started.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Again, my name is Angela Wittig. I'm a counselor, a financial aid counselor at Seattle University, and I'm joined by my colleague, Christy Brown over here. She's a counselor as well in our office. I'm going to be going over like a presentation that I hope is helpful. Some of this might be review. There's been lots of changes to the FAFSA, but we're hoping this year is much more smooth than maybe what you heard in the news or if you have other children in school for last year. We'll go through kind of the agenda, and then clearly we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So just as we directed, you have some cards on each table to write down questions. And I think we always find that probably the vast majority of your questions we hope to touch on during our actual presentation here. But I think questions that people have generally can be really helpful for the whole group, because if you're thinking it, then maybe someone at the next table, is thinking the same thing, or it would be helpful for a similar issue that they're running into. So without further ado, this is really just our kind of financial aid 101 to get you started. So just briefly, I'm just going to talk about what we're going to talk about tonight. And you'll see, clearly we're from Seattle U, but we want to make this presentation as helpful as it can be for families as you're looking at all different schools, whether it's local or across the country. So we're going to talk some basics about understanding costs and what students pay, how to apply for financial aid, and then what the next steps are about how to determine what maybe your out-of-pocket costs look like and the different options that you might have to cover those costs. So first of all, one of the most important things to consider when you're looking at financial aid and when you apply to different universities is, the direct costs versus indirect costs. And what we're talking about when we're talking about those two items, direct costs, this is very straightforward, but we're talking about the costs that are directly billed to a student's account at the school or university you're considering. Indirect costs, again, are costs that students will incur, but they're not directly billed at the school. So those two items make up what we refer to as a total cost of attendance. That sounds very basic, but you'll see why that's important and how that factors into financial aid when you're looking at all of the different pieces at different universities. So clearly, how much does college cost? And this is just an important piece of the puzzle, because different colleges, when you're looking at them, I think what we want you to take away from this is not just looking at the sticker price. In the end, you're going to want to be looking at a net price. And what we mean by that is how much the college costs versus how much financial aid you're getting. So you really are comparing apples to apples in the end, instead of just looking at the sticker price and being like, whoa, this is super expensive, it's out of my range. Because universities, you may be surprised about the amount of financial aid that you're eligible to receive. And we just want you to be well educated by the process and be able to make an educated decision about what's right for your family. So you'll see, we're going to talk just briefly about community colleges versus state institutions or private institutions, and how that location and the state of residency that you are living in, clearly most of us were talking about Washington, and how that can factor into the financial aid that you may receive. Clearly, I'm representing Seattle University, so we are a private institution, and that's a little bit different. But we want to give you a general overview about all of the different opportunities and options that you might be looking at. So what are you paying for? We talked briefly about this, but just to give you a good example, we're going to give you what we're looking at for our direct costs at Seattle University for this current academic year. And I always like to start with a caveat. When you're looking at this, I mean, I know I have been in financial aid for over 20 years now, and it's a shock. I'm a parent too. I'm planning for my kids in the same way. And we like to put this up here, but we want to show you why we don't want you necessarily to be looking at that sticker price and why that's important. So like, for instance, at Seattle U, we're showing you tuition, the fees, and the truth is we always want to be as transparent as we can with students and families to show these different pieces and get you to that bottom line, because the bottom line might look much different than what you would expect it to look like. So again, these were our actual costs for this current academic year. And so just to compare that, we also like to make sure that you're thinking about indirect costs. So indirect costs, depending on schools, may be included or not. So those are like books and supplies, transportation expenses, personal expenses. All of those items are things that you might want to consider and would look different if you're looking at a local school versus, traveling across the country for flights and so on and so forth. So again, just things you want to consider for budgeting when you're considering schools and financial aid. So clearly the big question is, will I be paying over $70,000 a year for my education? And we want to say right away, we say nope. Like, the vast majority of students are paying nowhere near that for a variety of different reasons. And I will explain that in more detail and why this is, one of the key pieces we want you to take away from this presentation. So again, I touched on this very briefly, but students always, what you want to be looking at is the net price. When we talk about net price, the first thing I can say, net price, again, in the simplest terms, is how much a college costs minus any financial aid that you're receiving. We're going to talk about what I'm referring to when I talk about financial aid, because that includes things like grants and scholarships. It also includes loans and other resources coming from either the federal government or the state government. And I'll talk a little bit more about all of those details soon. One nice thing, there's a variety of things, but the net price, one federal regulation that is in place is that every school has what's called a net price calculator. It's a regulation that it has to be on their website somewhere. And what that means is by plugging in your students' information on their website, it should give you a very, it's not an exact, but it's a very good estimate of what you would expect the net price to look like. And again, that way you're really comparing apples to apples compared to seeing a high out-of-pocket cost versus a state school. Clearly, there's going to be different costs associated with that, but there also can be a significant amount of financial aid coming from different sources at different universities. So the next question clearly is, how do I cover my net costs? How do I go about looking at that? So the first thing that we're going to encourage, and I'm sure everyone will have more questions about, is completing the FAFSA. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. Every academic year, students and parents are required to complete the FAFSA. We just have a quick rundown here, and clearly if you have in-depth questions, I know your counselors here, the school counselors, will be jumping in with a secondary presentation that will go into some more specific details with some screenshots that they found were helpful for their families to really look at kind of what it's going to look like to complete the FAFSA for this year. Again, I'll touch on briefly, you probably heard in the news last year, as far as completing the FAFSA, there were major issues from the side of the Department of Education. It was not an easy year. I won't tiptoe or lie about that by any means from the standpoint of a financial aid professional. I feel very fortunate to work at Seattle U. We have like a very talented group of colleagues that really problem solved in every way possible to help students out in a variety of different ways. Because the truth was the support that we needed from the Department of Education was not there last year. So we had to come up with a lot of creative solutions to get students the answers they needed, to the point that we have, we were on YouTube, we were on Reddit of all places to try to find solutions to help students, because we care that much. And I think, to be honest, we did a good job of getting the aid to the students that we could and finding ways to assist other students. Most students, I would say, while it wasn't easy, we found the solutions. That the trickiest students or the trickiest situations were students, for instance, who maybe had parents who didn't have social security numbers, or these different, more complicated situations. What I can say for this current academic year, the FAFSA is live now as of December 1st. It's been in beta testing for over a month. Everything honestly looks very smooth. We're importing FAFSAs at Seattle U already. We've been testing our systems, and the truth is, like, we are not seeing any of the issues that we did last year. So that is really reassuring. It seems to be going much more smoothly. And the truth is, in the long run, I've jumped in and done a test FAFSA during the beta testing stage myself, and it is working, and it's working well. It actually is much more intuitive, I would say, at this point, and it is automatically importing your information from the IRS, so it is a quicker process. I know that's kind of a hard pill to swallow after all of the trials and tribulations we've probably all heard about last year. But in our experience and anecdotally, it's looking much better. So knock on wood, wherever it is here, we're hoping that we will not see nearly the issues that we did last year. And it is available already to start considering to sit down and do your FAFSA. We throw this on here, like who, what, where, when, and why to do the FAFSA. I think most of you are probably pretty well versed with that. One thing that I will highlight is, like I said, it's available already. A lot of schools or universities will have a priority filing deadline as well. We throw ours on here, it's February 1st. A lot of schools will align with that. And the only reason I mention that is the priority filing deadline can be helpful in the sense that there are some forms of financial aid. Mostly, at least at Seattle U, we're talking about state financial aid that we get a limited pool of funding. And just to be as equitable as we can be, we have a priority filing deadline that we give priority to students who file their FAFSA earlier. So sitting down when you have a chance to look at it, it is available already. We'll show you a few more slides about, how to go about doing that. And like I said, if you have questions, both me and Christy will be here. If there's a question that you feel comfortable asking to the group, please feel free. We'll also be happy to take those individual questions. And I can say on Christy's behalf, she is a parent of former West Seattle High School students as well. So she has a lot to probably, informally, speak with you guys of what her experience has been, in relation to West Seattle High School and just financial aid in general. So we think we're really lucky to have Christy here tonight too. So how do you know if you're eligible to file a FAFSA? So it's pretty straightforward. Simply, if you're seeking a degree, you have a high school diploma or the equivalency. Clearly, students who are finishing up their degree now, you're good to go with that. You have to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, and that really is all that applies. So for most students, it's pretty straightforward that you can file a FAFSA, but don't panic if those items don't apply to you for whatever reason, because we're lucky to live in the state of Washington. We also have what's called the WSHS. So this is an application for Washington State residents that for whatever reason may not qualify to do the FAFSA application. You'll see a lot of it very much mirrors the FAFSA application. We have all the contact information here, and we work with WSHS students in the same way, and we evaluate their financial aid very much in the same way. So you just want to make sure that that would be a step you would look at as a Washington State resident if you do not qualify to do the FAFSA, the federal application. So I touched on this briefly, but we'll go in a little more detail about what types of financial aid you would be applying for. When you do the FAFSA, essentially, we're going to be considering you for all of these different types of financial aid. So clearly, us in the financial aid office work very closely with our colleagues in the admissions office. So most schools, the admissions office, when you submit your admissions application, will be looking at awarding scholarships based on merit. They're the ones that make the determination, but they communicate with us, and we make sure that any merit-based scholarships get on a student's financial aid award. Our role in the Student Financial Services Office is really more looking at need-based financial aid. And what we mean by need-based financial aid is the financial aid that we process based on your FAFSA application. The FAFSA, again, we'll go into a little more detail, but essentially when you're doing your FAFSA, you're entering your demographic information and then basic tax and asset information. When you plug all of those numbers into your FAFSA, it calculates a number called your SAI. That's your student aid index. Your student aid index it's just that. It's a number that we use to determine a student's eligibility for various types of need-based financial aid. And usually when we're talking about need-based financial aid, we're talking about grants. So like, I'm sure you've heard about the federal Pell Grant. There's also called a Washington State grant, a Washington College grant. There's different programs called like Washington College Bound through the state of Washington as well. The other piece that I always want to highlight about the FAFSA, a lot of families that I have worked with may sit down and say like, hey, I make this much, or, we have a good amount of assets. I don't think, it would be worth my time to do the FAFSA. And what we always strongly encourage students and families to do is to complete it. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Even if you feel like, you're in an income bracket that you don't think you'll qualify for, like, for instance, a federal Pell Grant. That may be true, but a lot of schools and universities do have a generous amount of need-based financial aid coming in the form of like institutional grants or scholarships that are need-based. So even if you're in a higher income bracket, it doesn't necessarily preclude you from getting additional need-based funds from a college or university. So we always encourage families to do that at least the first year. If you do it the first year and you're like, okay, I didn't get anything need-based, it could be a circumstance where in future years, maybe you don't necessarily need to do it, because that's another piece of the puzzle that I always like to point out. When you do your FAFSA application, it's an annual application. So you'll want to do it at the start of each academic year to qualify you for financial aid for the subsequent year. So any students who are starting their college career in the fall of 2025. It is the 2025-26 FAFSA that's available right now, and that's what you would be doing. And then it's always in the fall of the next year that you would do the FAFSA for the following year. So it's just a good reminder to sit down. You'll get plenty of reminders from your financial aid office, from the Department of Ed to do all of those things. But essentially, by doing that FAFSA, you're going to qualify yourself for all of these different types of financial aid, including, like I said, scholarships, which usually are merit-based, grants, which usually are need-based, and potentially what's called work study. I won't go into too much detail, but work study can be another resource that can be helpful for students and families. Essentially, that is just a job on campus where students can tap into their career services office to get a job and earn some money. It usually works different than every other type of financial aid, meaning like grants, scholarships, loans will disperse directly to a student's account to pay for tuition and fees directly, while work studies, students would get hired in a job and submit a time card and get paid every 2 weeks, just like any other job. But behind the scenes, a federal work study position, a little bit of that is supplemented behind the scenes to help pay them. But again, it can be a good opportunity for students to work part-time and earn a little bit of money towards their education. Last but not least, of course, the FAFSA also determines a student's eligibility for federal loans. So there is a limited amount of loan funding that students can apply for through the FAFSA application. There's what is called a subsidized loan and an unsubsidized loan. Subsidized means the federal government pays your interest while you're enrolled in school. So that's always the best type of loan to have. And every school will process as much in that type of loan for you first. There is also, like we have here, there also are parent loans. So that can be another resource that some families choose to tap into. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we just want to give a good overview of all the different types of resources that students and families might be seeing. So, of course, the next question is, say you get your financial aid package, you do your FAFSA, and you're trying to just determine how are you going to cover any remaining costs. So these are really the different items, at least at CLU or most universities, that you can consider. So clearly looking at the resources your family might have already, looking at outside scholarships. There's also what are called private educational loans. Clearly, at most schools, CLU included, we always encourage students to borrow the very least that they need, but this can be something that students can look at. A lot of schools will have a payment plan as well. That just makes things a little bit more convenient. For instance, at CLU, we, rather than paying everything up front, if you sign up for a payment plan, it can break it down in monthly installments over the course of the quarter. And what I can say, we talked briefly about Parent Plus loan, that would be a federal loan. What I can say for most families, they use a combination approach. And that can grow and change through the academic career at a student's college or university as well. Of course, one of the big questions is always about scholarships. This is just a good quick overview about different private scholarship opportunities that we have gotten feedback from students about having the most success. Private scholarships definitely can be, a great supplement to a financial aid offer that you're getting from a school, and it is worth a student's time. Because no matter what school you're considering, these would travel with you to any school or university that you're looking at. Like as a very brief overview, of course, we could do a whole workshop about private scholarships and applying for scholarships. But when I speak with students who are the most successful, I would say in most cases, they start locally. So maybe looking in your neighborhood, your, any place you're volunteering, a library, a faith organization, all of these different Hopefully our audio is back. Anyway, we're getting close to the end here. The very last thing I want to touch on that just can be helpful for a lot of families is what we refer to as special and unusual circumstances. What we mean by that, just like I had mentioned briefly, when you do your FAFSA, it uses what, like I said, your prior tax year. So in this case, you're going to be looking at tax information from 2023. For some families, maybe the information on your 2023 taxes might not be accurate compared to what's going on in your household right now. If that's the case, you as a family can't go into your FAFSA and override that information, but we as financial aid administrators can. And what I'm talking about in most cases is maybe if there's a job loss in the family or a separation or some major change that when the FAFSA pulls in your IRS information from 2023, it's just not correct anymore. This is always something that you would need to work with your financial aid office. So as you're looking at different schools, if you think this applies to you, you'd want to reach out to the financial aid administrators at the different schools that you're considering, and you'll find that they'll be helpful and happy to work with you on a situation like this, because it's something that we encounter on a regular basis. Most schools will have like a formal appeal process that we would ask you to submit that documentation. As long as we have all of those pieces, we can go in and we can override the information on your FAFSA with the goal of lowering that SAI number that we talked about earlier. That's your student aid index, with the hope of getting you additional need-based financial aid. So if you think that applies to you, you had individual questions, we're happy to talk with you one-on-one tonight, or definitely, reach out to the financial aid office at the schools that you're looking at. And again, we're just happy to be here tonight. We want to throw out our contact information. We would love it if any of you are considering CW, but we're not here to, recruit tonight. We're just trying to answer questions for everyone. But if things come up, we welcome calls and we want to help you guys out. So just throwing on our contact information here quick. We have our questions, but I think we're going to just continue rolling through to the next segment, and then we'll get to questions at the end. So thank you.
This would be a good time if you have questions, like put them on the index cards and we'll get them in a second. We're just going to walk you through, actually need to do a Teams thing first. The first thing is the first issue with FAFSA is around who is my parent, because that changed. Thank you. 2 years ago, where it went from being the person who you lived with 50% of the time to now it's amorphous for us, and we just tell kids to do the parent wizard. So there is a parent wizard through the FAFSA that's like the students log in, and then one of the first set of questions after their first initial demographic questions is around specifically who is my parent through the thing called the parent wizard, which is like they named it, not us, but we would choose that name if we could. And it is a number of questions that helps identify. I think what they're trying to ascertain is the assets, like who's supporting the student the most. But in some cases, have you seen kids have to enter both parents? Yeah. Yeah, so, and if you're like, how do I figure this out? Again, Parent Wizard, and all the students know that they have to start with the Parent Wizard. So they would do the Parent Wizard, and then this is the list of things that they've been given. They also have been asked to have a conversation with you. So it was FSAID, FAFSA, and having a conversation with you all about money. Because we had them compare costs if they did the FAFSA, if they didn't do the FAFSA. And we used a combined adjusted gross of 140 and had them kind of look through what would the cost be for Seattle U, Western, and Seattle Promise using the FSA estimator online. So this is one of the slides they got on Wednesday as they were doing the FAFSA estimator, but it really is like if you went to FAFSA now, you can do the parent estimator and have your kids walk through that. I'm just going to pause to make sure our tech is good. Okay, we're good. We're all good. Okay, great. Now we'll get going. So this is all kind of moved through the wizard. Do the parent wizard, and we'll know who the parents are. And I'm sorry about tech support for our friends online. Welcome back. We covered the student aid index, but when we met with them in classes, what we were really having them do is walking it through, and I don't know if this is incorrect, but in our scenario, our students' aid index was $19,000, and we're assuming that that is what we told them is that's what Seattle U is getting from the federal government in terms of what federal government thinks you all can pay a year for that student. So the student aid index is, I think, supposed to drive financial aid, but it depends at each school how that works out. Do you want to speak to that, or we can have speak to that directly?
Just really briefly. So the student aid index in the past, it was called an EFC. That was your expected family contribution. And that was what it sounded like. It's what you were expected roughly to pay out of your resources. Student aid index is not related to an out-of-pocket cost. It strictly is an index, so it's not related in the same way it used to be. It's really just a sliding scale that we use to determine the different types of aid that a student's eligible to receive.
But we did have them use it to use in the school's student aid estimator, like on your financial aid websites, to put that SAI. Yes. Okay, so they can still use that tool using the SAI. Yeah, go ahead. Miss Adina's going to talk.
Well, now it's not working.
Now it's not working.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, no, clear.
The CSS profile is something that some private schools might have you do. It's a more involved FAFSA where you're actually going to put in more asset information. So this is primarily a private school game, and for people who might be going into California. And do you guys even do the CSS profile? So it's more of a selective thing. Schools will make it pretty clear. So it's just a matter of having your student be aware of if that's something that they have to do or not. The Washington College Grant is something that we just want everyone to know about. It is a grant that students can get from the FAFSA, and you can only qualify for it by completing the FAFSA. It's only for Washington students, and it's income driven, but it's a nice, cute grant that students in Washington can get. And then this is a slide, it is outdated because we can't get an updated version of this. So the rates are different, but what we walked them through is the difference between a subsidized, unsubsidized loan, the repayment options through the federal loan repayment programs for like public service loan forgiveness. We walked them through that, and then the Parent Plus loan. We have a lot of discouragements for private loans for obvious reasons in terms of interest rates and forgiveness. So every student now has an understanding. With our student, they had $5,500 that they had to take out. So we just kind of talked through how you could get that forgiven over time.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about scholarships and how we kind of fill some of these gaps. So College Bound is a scholarship that some of our students are eligible for. This is a scholarship that students apply for as a middle schooler, and it's income based. So we can easily access, if you have any questions regarding whether or not your student is a College Bound eligible student, we can answer that. We're actually going to be pulling these students from classes next week. We're meeting with them Monday and Thursday of next week to just kind of review with them. Hey, you're eligible for this scholarship. Here's what you need to do to remain eligible. So they'll be hearing from us next week if they're a college-bound student. And then Seattle Promise, we are so fortunate to have the Seattle Promise program here at our school and to have our outreach specialist, Bradley Llewellyn, here with us this evening. So if you are a parent, your student's considering taking advantage of this scholarship, definitely go to Bradley with any specific questions you might have.
So if students are wanting to meet with Bradley on the website, on the counseling website, under our booking links for student appointments, there is a student appointment booking link for Bradley, and I constantly am directing students to go to that booking link. And so students can actually make an appointment with Bradley in the library any Tuesday that Bradley's on campus and can talk about Seattle Promise. I don't know if Bradley wants to speak to that at all, but.
Oh wait, announcement for our online friends and in person. We will eventually post this. We have to go through a process with the district to get things vetted that we post, but eventually we will post both presentations online as well, assuming the recording records.
Yeah, so I am here on Tuesdays in the library. I love to meet with students. It's, I can help them apply to Promise, apply to the college, since it is a sort of two-tiered process. A lot of students are really good about applying to the scholarship and then forget to apply to one of our community colleges, so they do have to do both. So yeah, I'm always here to help out with that. I also help out a lot with financial aid. Our students are all required to do their FAFSA or WSHS, so that's another big thing that if your student is planning to do Promise, they can meet with me for help with financial aid stuff as well.
One of the things we talked about for Seattle Promise is just having that as a backup for all students. We have every year we have students that have a dream school that the financial aid isn't realized. And if they haven't applied by Valentine's Day, they do not qualify for Seattle Promise. And most financial aid award offers don't come out until well after that. So we definitely every year have situations where in June we have students saying like, well, now I want to do Seattle Promise, and that opportunity is gone. So that's why we really want it to be a backup for everyone, because you just don't know the costs, and the cost of Seattle Promise or tuition is free, which is cheap.
Okay. We also have something wonderful. It's called the Western Undergraduate Exchange, or the WUI. And so the WUI is this really WUI, yeah, we laugh over fun. The Western Undergraduate Exchange is this really wonderful program where some other states offer similar or close to in-state tuition for a Washington State resident. Now there's a lot of specific details or asterisks to the WUI, including some colleges you will automatically qualify for the WUI if you are applying as a Washington student. Some schools you'll need to do a specific additional application. Some schools will have somewhat of a tuition reduction, but not completely in the same in-state. There's a little bit of some caveats with the WUI. But what we suggest is that the Western Undergraduate Exchange website has a list of every single college that offers any kind of WUI scholarship and the process of how to go about doing that. And so we always encourage students to look at this website, to look at if a school or a state they're considering going to for college has a WUI school. Typically, it's not going to be like your University of Oregon, but Oregon State University is a WUI school. So it just really depends on the specific university and the specific state, but it's absolutely worth checking out because there can be huge reductions in tuition cost. Oh, that was this stuff.
Okay.
Well, scholarships. Okay, great. We spend a lot of time talking about scholarships now, but much more so in the spring. Scholarships are free money, right? So we're encouraging students that there's no interest, they don't have to pay anything back. This is money that they can use, and it's free, no strings attached. So a lot of our scholarships are based on academics and how their GPAs. And so, for example, if a student is going to Seattle U, right, they have a certain amount of scholarship that's provided to them based on their GPA and how they're doing academically. But beyond that, there's a lot more scholarships that are talking about students' personal interests, maybe an essay that they've written for scholarships. So there's lots of different opportunities for students to gain scholarships. And those can be through universities themselves. It can be through private organizations. And it also can be through West Seattle High School because we have a series of West Seattle High School scholarships that come out in the spring, which is pretty cool.
This and WUI, and I think the next slide are ways that parents are, this is like a good way to get involved with your student. I know that a lot of them really want to own parts of the college search because it's around fit and around them kind of identifying their identity. I know some people are like, my kid is not owning their search. But this is one of the ways where like you can do the organizational skill to be like, these are scholarships that are happening. You don't have to. I certainly like would love for them to do this on their own. But the scholarship game, what Angela's saying, is a game. It is a numbers game. We tell them to use the first draft of their financial aid, their admissions letter or admissions essay, because most of the time that's where they pull on the heartstrings the most. And then we get them to edit it down for admissions reps. But the scholarship boards are typically just like our grandparents in the community who are like need their heartstrings tugged on. And it is 100% a game. So like we use me as an example. My grandma pulled me to an orchid show and someone settled up to me and was like, you gotta want a $500 scholarship. It's like weird places that are local is where you actually get the most bang for your buck. Our intern last year completely paid for Whitman with applying for a scholarship a week. And it's just doing that. We shared this all with them. Like Angela said, it's better to start locally. So you want to do it in places that are as small as possible in terms of competition. So West Seattle High School, West Seattle community, and just reaching out to different organizations to see if like your employer has scholarships. Then you also want to look at the college itself. Sometimes you have to apply for scholarships, sometimes by applying, you're in their scholarship pool. The Washboard is a website that is specific to Washington schools. So again, it's a smaller pool because only Washington students can apply using the Washboard. Niche and FastWeb are national searches. So it's last bang for your buck, but it is like just a time game. Naviance has scholarships that are administered by the district administers the search for them. So they're all district vetted. They're typically more local. Our website, our West Seattle Scholarship website, which this is a link to, is one where we are posting scholarships that are local that have reached out to us every year. What we have also told your students is 2 years ago, or was it 3, that Emerald City Pet Rescue reached out to us with a $10,000 scholarship for a West Seattle specific student, and no one applied. So it's not offered to us anymore. They took it away. But it's in their interest to apply to scholarships, even if they're close to meeting their criteria, but don't fully. And as someone who used to administer scholarships, if we had 10 scholarships to give out, only 9 qualified, but we had 1 apply that wasn't qualified, but a 10th student, they would still get the money. Which is why the last sneaky place to look for money is the high school websites local to where your student wants to go if they're not in Seattle. So let's pretend your kid is like, I gotta go to school in San Francisco, then I would look at San Francisco high schools to see if they have scholarship websites for scholarships you can apply to, because it's about a numbers game and we're trying to get as many applications out there as possible.
Okay, so this is the timeline that we shared with the students in their English classes this week with the seniors, just to kind of give you an idea of where we are, what's to come. So early December, the FAFSA is open. This week, your students should have completed their starting their FSA ID in their English language arts classes. That happened yesterday. We're here tonight. And then this December 6th conversation, what we encourage the students to do this week is we said, hey, if you guys haven't been talking about financial aid with your families yet, please do that now. We told the kids, we know it can be really sticky to talk to your parents about money. However, this is a big decision and you may potentially be taking on a lot of loans to pay for school that you might be paying off for a long time. So talk to your parents about like, hey, here's where I want to go to school. Here's what my financial aid picture is going to look like. Can we talk about this? And, do you have any money set aside for me for college? Are you going to take out a Parent Plus loan from the Department of Ed? Just being open and honest with your student about, here's what we can afford. here's how you can expect help from us, if any, is really helpful for them because it's a joint decision, right? You guys are both completing your portions of the FAFSA, and it's important for them to have the right information while they're making these decisions. So just a little note about that. And then we told the students that ideally their FAFSA has been completed and submitted by February 14th. We sort of said that because that's around the time of Seattle Promise deadline. Generally speaking, though, I mean, the FAFSA, the sooner you submit it, the better. There's not really a deadline per se, but we told the kids just get it done and get it done by February 14th. The sooner you do it, better. And then as we move through senior year, we're heading into the springtime. This is when students are hearing from colleges. So they're hearing back from colleges anywhere between January and May. And usually right after that, they're getting their aid letters and they're getting a clear picture of where they're accepted, how much it's going to cost them. That's where the scholarships really come in. So we always tell the students that scholarship season is kind of April, May, June. This is where they're trying to fill those gaps in what they didn't get in financial aid with scholarship money. And of course, reminding them that they can always appeal that financial aid award letter. You can always come back, call the financial aid office if you think you have some special circumstances that apply to you, see what type of deal you can work out. Because even though they have to accept their admissions at the school by May 1st, they have the summer to kind of figure out the financial aid piece of it.
And one of the reasons why we're encouraging students to get their FAFSA completed by Valentine's Day is because if there's any errors in your FAFSA, which does happen, like typos really matter in the FAFSA. So like misspelling a name can delay the FAFSA being processed by months. And so partially it's like paying attention in detail and completing the FAFSA. But why we want them to complete it in February is so that if there are errors, there's times to time for the college to receive the FAFSA information and then produce a financial aid award letter. Because if students are deciding to go to college on May 1st but have not received any information about financial aid, that can be a really tough conversation with the college later in the spring. So that is, I think, a little bit more of a dive in our FAFSA world. I feel like I've seen some folks writing lovely questions on index cards, and we're really excited about them. Also, if you are in our virtual event, please post any questions in the live Q&A, and we'll read them out loud. And now this is like the rest of the evening. We're here to answer questions and hopefully get to the bottom of some general queries. Okay, should we read that? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. The first question is
there an FSA per family? FSA ID per family?
everyone gets an FSA ID. So students will create their own FSA ID. In that process, they will then invite the parents to the parent cert. So it could be multiple parents, but each human being that is completing the FAFSA will have an FSA ID. Addendum to that, if you have multiple students in college, you'll have to sign each of theirs. So the student drives, so like if we were students and Miss Newman was our mom over there, I have to make one, Jean has to make one, and Ms. Newman has to sign both of ours and import her taxes into both. Correct? Yeah.
Sorry, I was. Oh no, that's sorry. Ask your question.
Okay, really quickly, this is a good question. What is Seattle Promise? So yes, Seattle Promise is sorry we didn't make that more clear, is a scholarship between the Seattle colleges. So it's offered at North Seattle, Seattle Central, and South Seattle. And it's for any student who graduates from a Seattle Public Schools high school. And if you get the scholarship, which you will, if you graduate from an SPS high school and attend one of the 3 Seattle colleges, you have your tuition paid for up to 90 credits worth. No, it's not based on merit. It's not based on income. You get this, it's guaranteed if you graduate from an SPS high school and go to one of those 3 colleges. It's only those 3 colleges. If they can't go to Bellevue College or Highline, it would have to be one of the Seattle colleges.
Small order.
Exactly. They have to enroll immediately upon graduating high school because there's like a readiness academy that they have to attend in the spring. And yeah, so your student couldn't take a gap year, for example, after graduating and then take advantage of the Seattle Promise the following year. You must enroll full-time as a student.
Okay, question about disclosing bank accounts, balances, and assets. Best to go with an actual current balance or latest statement balance so paperwork can be provided for documentation.
So, sorry, I'm turning off. Thank you. So as far as reporting assets, what we're always told, it's really a snapshot of what is in your account as of like when you're doing the FAFSA. So capturing that, and it can be clearly like after like your monthly mortgage is gone or whatever the case is. So it's like the static amount that is left after your monthly expenses are paid.
Answer.
Okay. Or should I do this one?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So the private schools look at students with higher SAIs, knowing that they won't get federal or state aid. So I can say from Seattle U, absolutely. Seattle U and most private universities are what we call need blind. So when admissions is looking at applications, we don't share that information with the admissions office. So the merit-based aid is completely determined without knowing what a student's resources are. We only work with admissions in the sense that once a student is admitted, that checks the box that they, essentially we can import their FAFSA information and start on the need-based financial aid. So private schools absolutely look at schools outside of that box. And then the other question was, do family members who are helping have to be included in the FAFSA? So when you do the FAFSA, you'll see one of the questions, it has all the income and assets, and there is a box for other. So if there are contributions coming from another source, you would want to include those on the FAFSA. Yes. That is the way to get around it.
When you say the question, so it says it over.
So if there's a 529 plan that is owned by a grandparent and not a parent. So this is, we're not financial planners. So I can't get into the nitty gritty of this. And you would want to check with your financial planner, but my understanding is a 529 plan kind of works outside of that what needs to be reported on it. So that is my understanding.
You have a question?
No.
All right. There was a question about Running Start students. Running Start students need to check their emails. They are always invited to our presentations. We send an email the week before with the times that Running Start students can attend our presentations, and then they're able to come and join us in any one of our presentation days. That's true for any junior and senior presentation that we offer, and there's many throughout the year. And they can attend 1 through 6. There's always one running that they can attend, and there's always 2 days for them to be able to join us. The question is, SAI versus EFC. For further clarification, is there still a required parent contribution amount?
So I would say yes and no. It's not quantified in the same way. So clearly, when we talked about the net price earlier, like most families, depending what school or university you're looking at, there will be some out-of-pocket cost that parents and families, ultimately the student, needs to pay after their financial aid offer, all the pieces are added to their aid package. It's just not as clear cut. And the reason I say that is, and the reason why, in the financial aid world, a lot of times our answer is, unfortunately, it depends. And the reason I say that is each student's financial aid offer can look different and is customized, but there's not like a very set like number that I can give you to say, like, if your SAI is this number, we would expect you to be paying that amount out of pocket, because there's a lot of moving pieces that all come together. At Seattle U, and a lot of schools will have what we call an out-of-pocket cost worksheet, where we try to make it as user-friendly as we can. Like when I showed you earlier tonight, we have our out-of-pocket costs. So we have these standard costs that all students are going to incur by coming to Seattle U. You know, if you're living on campus, all of those pieces are very standardized. What we do for our students is we have that out-of-pocket cost, and then we in-house have developed this out-of-pocket cost worksheet. So when you do your FAFSA, we're going to float in, you know, any grants, scholarships, loans that the student qualified for to subtract out that amount to let you know what that bottom line looks like. And I think every school that you're looking at should have some capability of doing that to get you to that final number. There's different types of aid that we look at in that way. And yes, the SAI factors into that, but it's not a straight, like, you can't think about it dollar for dollar. Nice. Yeah.
We have a good one about scholarships. So the question is it too early to apply for scholarships? Do students need to know where they're going first? So, okay. Okay, I'll cover some of it. So definitely not too early to apply for scholarships. There are some that are active right now that have earlier deadlines. As far as knowing where you're going, oftentimes you don't. So some scholarships will be school specific, of course, like this one is for students wanting to go to UW, for example. But a lot of the time, if it's a general scholarship, they don't need to know where they're going. What'll happen is they'll indicate where they're applying, where they're interested. And then later in the spring, once the students get accepted, or after the student gets the scholarship, they'll say, hey, congrats, you got XYZ scholarship. Let us know what school you're going to by this deadline, and then they will send the money. They'll disperse the funds to that school's financial aid office, which typically isn't until the spring. So they can definitely apply now, even if they don't know where they're going. Most students don't know where they're going at this point in the year. So.
The partial Bradley question, so we can come to you. If you are completing bridges, how is the process for applying for
Yeah, so students who are planning to go to bridges are still eligible for promise, but they don't apply to promise until they're finishing bridges, basically, because that's when they're going to be entering into promise. So they're going to wait until they're finishing up that program, and then they will apply to promise. Also, it is important to note that Seattle Promise is a levy-based program that does technically currently expire next 2 years from now in 2026. So this is all pending levy renewal and whatever that looks like. So.
Bridges is a program for students with IEPs to kind of have a continuation of high school and readiness for after high school. You also would complete your FAFSA that year. So if they're doing bridges, they would go into bridges, do their Seattle Promise and their FAFSA that same year. Just think of it as like an extended high school year.
One more. So the question was, does a one-time back pay payout count towards annual income? In 2023, this family received a payment. So what I would say is, if it's on your taxes, it will be imported onto your FAFSA. But this would be a circumstance you would definitely want to reach out to your financial aid office. From, you know, clearly we'd have to go into more details and look at everything. But if it's a one-time payout, this is a perfect example of, it's not something you expect every year, and the financial aid administrators should be able, with the proper documentation, to remove that section and rework your financial aid to look like a typical year without that payout. The other question was Washington State grants. Does it apply only if attending Washington State schools? And yes, that's absolutely true. You have to be a Washington State resident attending a Washington State school to tap into that.
Any new questions in the community? Don't need to be on a minute card, virtual or in person. Good job. We could play the Kahoot with you that the students had play if you are just needing an extra level of excitement, or you guys can head out and thank you so much for coming. We will be here if you want to give me more questions. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. I did too. Even like random orders, right? With that.
I got three shots.
Oh, wait, okay. Wait, sorry. What if actual income is far lower than gross income because we've earned a lot of savings?
I would say, so with her, if it was reported, if you reported it in your taxes, well, you know.
It is reported.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you so much. So good to see you. It is reported in your taxes.
Or you know what, maybe, let's let Angela answer that.
Okay.
Question. You guys were talking about, you went through this with the students this week. We were out of town. If they'll still refresh it with them, or does he have to come in during lunch?
We gave the teachers all of the resources from the lesson this week in Schoology. There's like a whole counselor folder with all of the resources there. So we can access them there. Yeah, they have the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question on the FAFSA, if there's like fields where you don't need to put much in any information, should you leave a blank or put a 0?
I think it'll automatically put a 0 in there.
Because CSS didn't do that.
I think we.
I said CSS. For what school?
This is our.
Oh, California school.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's some areas where we didn't qualify, so we didn't know, do we leave a blank or do we put a 0?
Yeah.
Made it feel like
We
we
just
just,
say.
Okay.
even though we knew there was nothing there.
Yeah.
That's what thinking the FAFSA.
I can ask you a question.
Yeah. That'd be a good.
Okay.
Angela.
So good to see you, Christy. Thanks for coming in. I really appreciate it.
I would say they would want to reach out to their aid office. It could be a good circumstance for an appeal.
Recommending reaching out. Maybe specific. Yeah, colleges, financial data office. It's really usually office.
Because what what
Potentially appealing.
and potentially, I think they would want to know, you know, what were the circumstances that led them to needing to borrow everything from savings? Because usually that means like there's something else going on, and if we can capture that, then
During the circumstance to
surround.
stances. Wow, so are you waiting for me?
A question, I guess you mentioned, maybe I'm thinking of the passage, you know, if there's certain where they want to talk about zero or not. Okay. You, I wish there was, that's what my family had to do. A lot of. Yeah. You're. In this year's FAFSA, now let's ask them an issue of the site you go right, but now it's culture. Because our CSS application and ledger, all of the we didn't know. Because they're released, if we didn't want to make it. So that's a higher portion of the 0. That's my, perfect, I think this year. I mean, good. Yeah, that was gonna be okay, great, thank you. Like, are you driving out there? Or are they not?
So they borrow a lot, so they basically had like big savings pot and then they took all their money out of savings. Wouldn't that show them a 0 assets or what's it is?
Yes.
$1,000 in savings.
Yeah,
Dollars in my savings. And it's like-
yes, so it's,
So then
we would see it already, that they would be, yeah, so I think you're interpreting it the right way, yes. So it sounds, yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, no, so it sounds like in that situation, like, I just don't want to be like reading between the lines in the wrong way. It sounds like it would just be accurate on the FAFSA if they took it out and like their savings used to be at this level.
Income is far lower, but like they're gonna see their income statement.
Yeah,
And so then they're saying actual like what their bank account has.
that's how I'm interpreting it too.
It's so bad. Nah, slash review, but I'm like, I can't believe I'm even trying to guess this question. Okay, well, no. So triple, there.
A little bit, there always are, but that's.
So what was the one? Were they asking? Oh, now I can't remember what it was. It was like 2 questions ago. It was contributing.
The 529.
Not that one. The one that was just like, it was like 2 questions before we ended. And I was like,
Like they had a lump sum
yeah.
payment.
what was that?
So sometimes when someone like
They
Either-
inherited something.
they inherited or they retired and got some sort of like severance package that
Sure.
it's on their taxes for that
It's like
one year
$1,000.
or whatever it is,
Yeah.
but it's not like their usual situation. Like that's not something they can count on, that they don't always give
Right.
bonuses at that level. That is definitely something that students can appeal. And if they show us like, hey, I separated from this place, I got this one-time payment for whatever reason, I don't expect to receive it again.